welcome everybody. Delighted to be the first act here today and really excited to be talking to Alberto Rizzoli, co-founder and CEO of V7, one of the most exciting AI companies coming out of the UK and Europe. And I'm going to get right down to it, Alberto. Maybe tell us a little bit, because this is not your first rodeo. You're a multiple-time founder, and maybe tell us a little bit of your background and how you came to start up V7 and what V7's mission is.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, great. Audio is good. So we're told to speak in this direction rather than to each other, just so you know, in case we're now facing one another. This is my second company in the AI space, specifically in the deep learning space. I started 10 years ago in 2015 with a computer vision company called iPoly, based in San Francisco, that was building general purpose computer vision models to help the blind and visually impaired identify objects around them. So you could download an app on your phone that knew about 5,000 objects. You could wave your phone around and would identify a bottle of water, a glass turned upside down, a coffee table. And this was the early days in AI in which the models were very underpowered. They were much smaller than they are today. But it could start to spark up the imagination of what AI could eventually do one day. It was a successful run for 2015. We built a lot of technologies that enabled folks to identify pretty much anything in front of them. And it was a bit of a ChatGPT moment where, in a small way, where people could download something on their phone, try it right away, and it would just work on everything that was around them. This work in computer vision made us realize that AI was restricted by a training data bottleneck. Effectively, to make models that could actually help us in real-world jobs, they needed a huge amount of label data, which we then figured out is readily available on the internet for a whole lot of things. But there's still a lot of useful information that is found within our brains and inside the know-how of companies. And that led to starting V7, which started as a workflow automation company for data labeling specifically. And data labeling is basically teaching AI. So V7's first product is called Darwin, and it allows huge numbers of humans to teach AI how to perform really mission-critical tasks, like detecting cancer in pathology slides, or in the medical field, identifying any kind of medical imaging. In healthcare and life sciences, we are #1 in the world by logo coverage, so most of the medical device manufacturers that produce AI to identify any pathology that you might have in the human body use V7 as a way of teaching these AI models how to detect things that could be life-threatening, or all the way to small pathologies or ultrasounds for the betterment of human health. And the key is to create these digital assembly lines where humans and AI work together to effectively teach AI in a very efficient way. It was previously done very artisanally by doing a lot of this work manually, and now it gets done by having AI hand over as little of the work as possible to human beings that are effectively teaching things on screen. About a year and a half ago, we took a component of V7 Darwin that was focused on document understanding. A huge part, for example, of the healthcare world, of insurance world, of banking, involves paperwork. And we evolved it into a new product called V7 Go that allows the development of AI agents that go beyond the extraction of data from documents into what we call knowledge work automation, which is effectively not just understanding what's in a document, but performing all the reasoning steps that happen afterwards. So if you are performing underwriting processes for an insurance company, or if you're processing a mortgage, all this work doesn't just require understanding one document, but looking at other guidelines, extracting sources from it, and implementing them up as part of a process that can now be largely replaced by an agent. And so both products are very focused on maximizing human productivity, one for teaching AI brand new skills, the other one for applying these skills to things that we're already doing in middle offices and back offices. And our thesis is that a lot of this work can already be solved with today's technology. We don't actually need additional breakthroughs in AI to solve the majority of the work that we do in front of our computers today. What we need is a good way of setting up these agents and these workflows so that we can trust them at scale when we have to give them 300 tasks that we do in a given week, and make sure that all 300 are done consistently, following the guidelines that we have as a business. So not just with the information that a model like GPT-4 will know, but rather what do we do as a company internally? What do we consider good? What's an overpriced bid versus an underpriced bid? And all these rules can be implemented within the platform. So it's been a 6-year journey now with V7, and we're headquartered here in London. The majority of our team is over here, it's an incredibly exciting time for AI now because it's no longer just an R&D and scientific topic, but it's something that people are willing to implement as part of their day-to-day work.
Yeah, and what you're describing is, I guess, a business that is evolving and scaling rapidly, but also an industry we know that is really scaling at enormous pace. And I'd love to understand and share with the audience a little bit around how you think about the operational model that an AI sort of business needs to adopt. Is it different to maybe a more traditional tech company that we would have seen even 5, 10, 15 years ago? What should you be thinking about if you're running that kind of a business?
Yeah, a good way to think of it is that a lot of AI products now are closer to services to services than they are pure SaaS products. So rather than being a tool that does one thing, which is what we're used to buying in procurement for a team, it's actually more of an end-to-end service. And in some cases, there's also human in the loop in a lot of AI services that we use, even though we don't know. And so from an entrepreneurial perspective, it's easier sometimes to disrupt the services business model than a pure product business model. And I would actually advise to look at it that way. And the low-hanging fruits today are largely the things that are somewhat repetitive and done at scale within any business. Something that everyone does here, for example, would be invoice reconciliation. There's no reason why it should be done by humans today. There's very few reasons, but there's almost no reason at all. So I think everything that we consider internal service that does not involve very important human communication, say nursing, is something that AI can disrupt today. It doesn't need additional innovations.
And you need, obviously, it is obvious in an AI company, you need technical expertise, you need developers. But it strikes me, as I talk to a lot of our clients in the AI scene, that the expertise that they need from developers also changes rapidly. Does that change how you think about your workforce planning and your resources?
Yeah, majorly. So I think software has never been easier to build than today. We're seeing startups appear everywhere because an MVP takes a couple of days to build in a functional state. It doesn't mean that it can scale. It doesn't mean that it can handle 1 million users. But it still means that in the same way that junior developers can build an MVP, senior developers can be a lot more productive, both with AI tools and with the fact that we're standing on the shoulders of giants with libraries and technologies that are truly tried and tested. And a team of 10 people can now do the work that maybe a team of 50 was doing when I started my entrepreneurial journey. And I think it's going to get to a team of 100. So what this actually means is that fewer, say, 10x truly transformational developers can create the backbone of really robust products in a much faster way. And in the same way, the talent sphere is changing in other areas like design, where designers, the role of a full-time designer has changed quite a bit, where they previously took several months to refresh a website. Now you can use a tool like Framer or Webflow to do it in a much more rapid time frame. And so what's actually happening is one designer that is particularly skilled can actually spend a tenure of a year at a company and have enormous impact and then move on to something else. And so it's sort of also breaking the way the labor market works within AI business, or within tech businesses in general. There's roles for people that are creating something brand new, and they'll be done with that in a year rather than in the 2 to 3 years that it took beforehand. And then there's roles of people that maintain and grow a company, which I would suggest keep your best talent to stay with you full time for as long as possible, but don't expand a team massively in headcount like we did in 21 and 22, which leads to these inefficiencies over time. There's also a change in the need of middle management. I think we've digitized the world so much after COVID that people have a lot more power to manage themselves. And I think if you look at the changes in even large companies in Silicon Valley, middle management seems to be the area that is taking the biggest hits in terms of reduction in workforce. And there's good reasons for that. People are now completely connected onto Teams or on Slack. There's tools coming out of our ears to manage work. And now there's AI coming into these tools that can also manage the work that a manager would normally do. So aside from the interpersonal side of things and doing one-to-ones, which is another topic, I think that this is starting to become a lot more efficient in the way we run businesses. there's perhaps less of a need of mega headcount growth in order to scale a company. And we're starting to see businesses that cross 10 million ARR with 10 people or less, which is something we've never seen before, or incredibly rare cases. And there's companies that are hitting 100 million run rate with less than 100 people. So I think that's super exciting. It might not last for a long time because at some point you need to create not just a product moat, but a distribution moat, and that does take humans. But the 0 to 1 journey has now never been easier with basically seed stage money to get to way past growth stage. And so really focusing on that small initial team when starting a business has become more important than ever. And then proving and validating a use case or a tool in AI that can then lead to basically escape velocity and growth now doesn't require a Series A or a Series B. It can be done in a much smaller environment.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I suppose when you think about some of these businesses, they're scaling rapidly. They're, in some cases, consuming large amounts of capital, but the world around them is changing very quickly as well. And so you mentioned the word moat, and that's something I'd like to just get your view on in terms of when the technology is changing so quickly, when there's large amounts of capital going into developing a lot of these companies. If you're a founder of one of these businesses, how do you create a defensive moat around your business so that what's growing at 200-300% this year isn't dead next year?
Yeah, I think moats are changing, and I think founders shouldn't worry about moats so much. It's a story that we craft, but it's a story that is a little fickle. We, for example, throw away a lot of our code every 6 months. And every 18 months, the product has almost a complete refresh. And it's a necessary thing. I mean, when LLMs came by, I think AI companies that did not throw away most of their code and then refreshed it with foundation models in mind have started to struggle because these capabilities have not caught up. And in a similar fashion, I think even if you have the strongest model in the world, that lead is going to last a few weeks now, no longer months. And so it's a continuous race. And the hardest moat to overcome right now is probably distribution, and it's in the hands of bigger companies. So there is a risk that all these fantastic AI products that we're seeing today, I'll make one mention, 11 Labs, fantastic company, headquartered here in the UK, makes the best voice models in the world that produce realistic human voice. And they built a moat by building the best quality models possible. But larger companies like OpenAI, which is now almost a big company, or Google, have the ability to create somewhat of an equivalent product by investing about a year of R&D with some smart people in it. And so because catching up to research and development in AI and the shortage of software developers that we used to have 10 years ago is no longer as real, once you have a technical moat, you need to start finding moats elsewhere because that doesn't last for very long. And in fact, I think it's correct to just not consider the technical moat to be a thing unless you have something truly differentiated in the way you perform anything. But really, I can think of that many things in AI specifically that are considered technical moats aside from chip design, which is blocked by other factors outside of true human innovation. So distribution becomes a big challenge for companies, and for the UK in particular, one of the best ways to overcome distributions, I think, is to consider the US to be the first market that you land into rather than Europe. It will accelerate you a lot faster. You can still be headquartered in the UK, but you expand in a much faster growing business environment, and you create the distribution mode. You create the brand recognition ultimately, rather than struggling in a smaller market in the UK and then expanding to Europe afterwards.
So a little bit of maybe first mover advantage when you've got something, but remaining nimble. So I suppose you've mentioned a few areas there. What, at the moment, what is your biggest challenge? Is it on the technical side? Is it on sort of capital, human resources, go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, competition is fierce because a lot of AI companies copy each other. So you could do something truly different, you launch it, and then 3 months later, your closest competitor has built something similar. It might not be as good, but eventually they'll get there. And again, this is because it's never been faster to build with code than today. Another one is what I mentioned, which is we're a UK company, but 65% of our revenue is US, and I wish it was 90 plus. It makes things a lot easier when you are in a market that considers a number of brands that are sort of soon to be incumbents over there. So we're in the middle of a US expansion, and I think we're starting to see, just a quick statistic, if the equivalent revenue that takes about a 65-day deal time in the UK takes 30 days in the US. So it's for the same amount of revenue, it takes about half the effort. And so, again, rather than considering this is where we're building the company, this is where we're selling, go for the areas that are going to buy the product the fastest, keep the talent in the UK for building the product and handling the operations, and then repatriate effectively a new satellite team or the regional team back into the UK when you're done with that expansion.
How much time do you spend in the US then as the CEO in order to really cement that market?
About a third of my time, but I think it should be 2/3.
Really? Okay.
Now that we're sort of in flight and go-to-market becomes something that I need to spend more time on rather than product. And when you have a product team that truly understands like what the next 3 months of roadmap should look like and works a little bit more on autopilot because they truly understand the product at first principles, then it's different. And one more note on that, I think roadmaps are, customers often ask, hey, can you show us the yearly roadmap for the product so we see what we're buying when we're signing up for a year? I think roadmap should be no longer than 3 months nowadays in AI companies in particular. You actually don't know what's going to come out in 3 months. There's capabilities around agents that can control screens. There's more reasoning capabilities coming out by the large language models that should basically demolish your roadmap and have you rebuild it afterwards. So I think it's not just us. I think all major AI companies think no more than 3 months in advance as to what they want to build.
That's both very exciting and terrifying, but at the same time.
It can be also fun if you like building. If you like
well, as long as you have that mindset, keeping nimble. You mentioned, I suppose, the market that you've created for the company around life sciences, biotech, and you've got some really large global clients in there, the likes of Roche, Bayer, Boston Scientific, Mercedes-Benz is there as well. Can you just talk a little bit around how you've been successful in the B2B sale to large enterprises? It's something that for new founders, it can be a really tricky thing to navigate.
Yeah, it takes a long time. The sales cycle can be brutal in enterprise, so I actually think if you're a first-time founder, you should start in mid-market or even startups as customers, which tell you things how they are. You don't get stuck in procurement, and your deal might not die because of some strange misapplication of bad pick or whatever it might be. I think for us, the thing that really made us successful is the fact that we spent huge amounts of time with the scientists, with the people that were building the models to understand all the quirks and nuances that they wanted to see in the tool. And it's quite hard to do it I'm not a doctor by trade, but I had to learn a ton about healthcare and life sciences so that we could make a product that was delightful for radiologists to use and for them to see an MRI scan and navigate it in 3 dimensions and find the right pathology to label. And this is something that they do in a matter of seconds on professional tools. They're hyper-productive beings. And so really understanding those quirks of user experience. In every Era application now with V7 Go, we work a lot with banking, with asset managers, for example. And so understanding how would an analyst be productive on screen and sometimes sitting next to them or watching their screen recordings about how to do their work, what numbers do they look at? Because that's effectively what you need to replicate in the work that an agent does. An agent is basically just a pretend human that's controlling a screen. And so it's understanding all these steps that you can't rock yourself as a founder that's coming from a software background.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm going to maybe close by asking you to maybe give us 1 or 2 areas that for first-time founders that particularly want to build companies in the AI space. What are maybe the 1 or 2 tips that you would sort of emphasize for them?
So probably 3 things. One I mentioned before. Start in the UK, don't be afraid of that, but start a Delaware Corp with a UK subsidiary so you can more easily net revenue and investments in the US at first. And consider this the place where you build things. There's incredible technical talent in Europe and the UK that wants to live and work here. but do all your sales in the US at first. It's going to make your job significantly easier. Number 2 is understand things at first principle. Consider yourself a technical founder, even if you're not, and try to learn the technical details of it. Only if you actually understand the first principles of how AI works can you build something that's truly differentiated. There's a lot of very smart people there that are in the same race. And the third would be to build today and build as much as possible. There's a strange thing with building AI products that you actually don't quite understand how good they can be until you've built the first, the second, the third, the fourth prototype. And it's true even in companies like ours where we have several dozen engineers, but we still need to build something to figure out like, oh, actually the data should be indexed differently. Oh, the model should react in this step and then take go and perform a reasoning step over here. And it's never happened that we could build something in designs or in a pitch deck and it actually worked out the same way when we actually produced it. It never happened. Yeah. So rather than building a deck and making your pitch beautiful and thinking about the brand and all these things, just start building something. It will open up your mind a lot more. So kind of start before you're ready as an example. Don't worry too much about front loading what you're going to do and have a grand plan because it's not going to work out that way. Halfway through, or actually in the first month, you're going to figure out that all the assumptions that you made before about how this product would work, what it would help with, are not necessarily going to be true. And so just keep building, keep iterating on what you're doing. And then at some point when users will tell you that this is delightful to use, that's when you go and raise money and scale the team and grow from there.
That's a great insight. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Alberto. Please join me in thanking Alberto Rizzoli. Thank you.